Sciatica can stop you in your tracks with too many struggling for weeks or months or longer without any kind of relief. And the main reason for this is that you're doing the wrong exercises and stretches. And more importantly, you don't have a plan or strategy to deal with the underlying cause of sciatica at all. Today, we're going to show you exactly what you need to do to get out of pain now. We'll help you understand sciatica a bit better. And finally, we'll give you those strategies to not only get relief right now, but actually get long-term relief and resolution of this problem for good. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Michael Fatika, the lead osteopath and spine specialist here at Back in Shape. We help people around the UK and all over the world fix their back pain from home and get back in shape for the long term. Now, before we get to the plan, we're going to quickly cover a few details on sciatica to help you understand everything better. The sciatic nerve is the largest nerve in our body, and it can be irritated from two key areas. And these are the upper roots of all of these little nerves that come out of the lower lumbar spine and the sacral spine that join together to become the sciatic nerve in here. This is the largest nerve in the body, and it travels out of the pelvis and down the back of your leg into the lower leg and into the foot, branching off at various points to become smaller, lesser known nerves. Sciatic type symptoms are generally describing the pain that comes from the lumbar spine that is experienced in the leg somewhere. Now, this could be the buttock, it could be the back of the thigh and the hamstring, it could be down in the lower leg, so the calf area, or round on the side of the shin, on the outside of the lower leg. It could be down in the foot as well. Sciatica is a rather broad term, so it covers a lot of these areas. You might have some of these, more of them, or all of them, and still have that quote-unquote diagnosis of sciatica. Then there's the specific sciatic nerve pain, which is literally traceable with a pencil or a pen down the back of the leg following the course. And this is, generally speaking, less common. If it's that last example that you're experiencing, this can feel like a very sharp burning pain or shooting pain down the length of that nerve in that way that is traceable with a pencil or a pen. Others might feel burning or a hot copper wire, sometimes described in the lower shin. Others will feel tension, stiffness, discomfort, aching, and general pain in those areas that we've described as well. Some of you will experience a mix of those. Others of you will experience pins and needles or numbness, again, in the same sort of areas. When it comes to the muscles, we're primarily looking at the muscles of the gluteal region. These are any muscles that are controlled by the nerves that originate in the lumbar spine that go on to become the sciatic nerve. This could be the very popular piriformis. It could be your glute muscles, of which there are 3. It could be other of those lateral hip rotators, which piriformis is one of, the gemellus, the obturator muscles. It could also be your hamstring muscles down the back of the thighs. It could be your calves and the smaller muscles that work on the foot as well. It could be some or more or all of these muscles, depending on your specific injury. The thing is, it doesn't really matter which one of these symptoms or collection of these symptoms you have. The cause all originates in the same region, and that is the lower section of your lumbar spine. It is going to be most commonly the L4-5 and the L5-S1, these last two segments where the lumbar spine finishes and then joins on with the sacrum, that can be injured. Diagnoses such as disc herniations, spondylolisthesis, disc strains, facet joint injuries, etc. can all be the real root cause of your sciatica. Now, regardless of which of those symptoms that you have, the cause of your sciatica will be coming from the lower section of the lumbar spine. This is the area that the sciatic nerve roots can actually be injured. And this could be the L4-5 or it could be the L5-S1 segment. Most commonly at these segments, it is some sort of disc injury or injury to the surrounding ligamentous structures that creates inflammation around where these nerve roots exit and causes compression, pressure, aggravation, or general irritation. And we know this from literally thousands of members and patients over the years with sciatic symptoms, that it doesn't really matter which variation you've got. The root cause can be the same in many people with many different symptoms. And when we stop chasing the relief of these specific symptoms by stretching and funny positions and start addressing the cause of your sciatica, you will find that results start to flow very quickly. It's really important that we cover those bits first to help you understand your sciatic symptoms and the causes of those. We've now got 3 principles which underpin the strategies that we're about to talk about and show you to really get relief from sciatica. And hopefully you've understood that it's not a muscle. It's not some muscle that's tight, although there will be muscles that are tight. It's not something that's compressing the nerve in the legs or a specific problem in the leg itself. It is a problem that stems from the root cause in this section here. And if we start to address this with these 3 principles, you're going to have success. It's important that also you stop doing things that violate these principles, as we'll see a little bit later on. Principle 1 is that we're actually dealing with an injury in the lower back. And a great way to classify sciatica is to say that it is lumbogenic leg pain, meaning it's the pain in the leg that is generated from the lumbar spine. And therefore, we need to have the lumbar spine as the pedestal or the priority in our recovery process. And that is specifically going to be the L4, L5 segment, which is this one here with the disc in the middle, and the L5, S1 segment, again with the disc in the middle at the lower section. This is the last mobile joint of your spine. The second principle concerns the congestion that occurs at these segments, in these little holes, and in the spinal canal. When we have an injury, there is a lot of inflammation, which is a natural and normal part of the process. And just like if we've got an ankle, it swells up. In the ankle example, you'll know how big that ankle can sometimes swell. But when it happens in here, with such a confined space, that's when these roots are irritated and the sciatica symptoms start to onset. So we have to have a way to manage that excess inflammation that doesn't undermine the injury in the first instance. The third principle is that of the instability problem. The instability problem is the fact that we have an injury to these segments, and when a joint is injured, its integrity and ability to hold itself in the right position and then move effectively is impaired. And if we use the example of our finger to really hit this point home, if you've dislocated your finger out to the side, the ligaments that maintain this finger so it can move in a nice hinge direction have been compromised. And when you try and then move that finger, it doesn't move quite as well as it should do, and things catch, it strains, it's uncomfortable. In short, it moves in an unstable, atypical fashion. When we have these injuries to the lower back, it's not uncommon that instead of moving nicely like this spine does, some of these joints where they're injured actually shear. They move in ways that aren't typical. They move in ways that can potentially aggravate or pinch the nerve more, or at the very least, change the pressure or size of this hole to put more pressure on that nerve. So now we've got all of that out of the way, we're going to get onto the strategies themselves. And the very first one is going to be a short-term relief-based strategy. You're going to follow these exercises and activities in order, ideally, and you're going to do them a couple of times a day. It shouldn't take you too long, but if you do it right, it's really going to start to address some of the components that make your sciatica worse, that aggravate that injury at the root cause of it. Step number 1 is going to be decompression. And that means that we're going to be taking pressure directly off the root cause of these. It's the squashing down that creates the injury, so we need to do something to stop that. And with this, we've got 2 stretches that we're going to do. The very first one is going to be the bed decompression, which I'll demonstrate in a moment, where we're lying across here and we're using our arms at the top to pull, to create a pull that way with the weight of our body holding our pelvis and legs nice and still. And that creates a nice decompression and stretching out of the vertebra in the lower back. If you do it just right, you're going to feel a little aching just down here in that lumbar spine. And what this looks like, you can do it on your bed at home, is simply getting onto this position here, making sure that our armpits are just short of the end of the bed. And then we're going to elevate our arms over the edge like so, support our head so we've got a bit of a break, and then our elbows are being pressed back down in that direction there to create this stretch. And your job as you're doing this is to really relax your lower back, legs, and pelvis as much as possible when you're getting those pumps and stretches happening through the lumbar spine. When you're doing this one, hold the pumps for around about 3 to 5 seconds, and then relax for 3 to 5 seconds, and repeat that for 10 to 15 times before we get on to the next one. This next one, you might have seen it before if you've watched our channel for some time, and that is the towel decompression. So much of our daily life is spent sat down, flattening the lordosis, damaging these discs, putting unnecessary strain through them, and stretching all the back here and all those ligaments that are damaged, the disc, etc., with regards to those disc herniations and bulges being at the root cause of your sciatica. And so what the towel does here is take the ligaments and muscles off tension whilst creating a little bit more of a decompressive stretch as we lie over the towel like so. It supports that natural lordosis, that natural backward bending curve that we should all have in our spine to set the spine in the right position. It's kind of like going back to that finger dislocation that we mentioned earlier, putting that finger back straight again in its natural anatomical position. So when you're doing this stretch, it's best to be doing this on the floor, but you can do it on the bed as well. And all you want to do is roll yourself onto your side and then onto your back like so. Lift your bum up off the floor, place it in toe, right in the lower part of that lumbar spine, and then come onto the front of your hips, just below where your belt is, just below where those bony bits are, and press down on them. And you should feel it supporting that natural backward bending arch that's there in your lumbar spine. And then you simply put your hands together and relax in this position for anywhere from 20 seconds to 5 minutes. When you've finished, it's really, really important that you fuse everything and roll to your side nice and slow. You'll have a little bit more space than I've got on this bench to do that, but then you pop yourself up nice and slowly to the side using better technique than that. When you're doing the towel decompression, when you get off the towel and you've rolled to the side, you'd be on the bed or you'd be on the floor, you've got plenty of space. Give yourself 20 seconds, a minute before you worry about getting up. And once you have got up, just move around normally. No bending, no rounding, no touching your toes or anything like that. Just keep there with nice, good, tall posture. Step number 2 is going to be to mobilize the hip joints. And there's 3 ways we recommend you do this, and they're going to be resources further down in the description to help you do this effectively. But these 3 stretches are going to be addressing the hamstrings, the hip flexors, and the glutes. These muscles are often involved, less so the hip flexors, but they tend to be a factor because of the way we use our bodies on a daily basis. And we're going through some simple stretching, but you cannot make the classic mistakes, which you've probably done before. When we're using these stretches, we are stretching the hip. We are not stretching the back. The hamstrings, for example, run from the back of the knee down here up to the ischial tuberosity, which is this bony bit. And you can see very clearly on the spine, they do not move the lumbar spine. They do not involve the lumbar spine. Yet too many people, when they do a hamstring stretch, you see round their lower back terribly. And that is violating that principle we discussed earlier with the understanding of an injury in the lower lumbar spine. We're just rounding our lower back and we're not actually being effective through the hamstring either. So when we're doing the hamstring stretch, we might do it seated like so into this position, keeping a neutral spine, pivoting at the hips so we actually stretch the hamstrings. Classic mistake, once more, is that we round the lower back. You need to avoid that at all costs. When it comes to a simple hip flexor stretch, in this position here, pivoting forwards, again, it's the hips that we are working on. We do not want to be arching the spine in any way, shape, or form. We also don't want to be tucking the spine. We want to be holding it still in that neutral position. Classic mistakes when people do the hip flexor stretch and jar their lower back, because remember, going back to principle number 3, is that unstable or instability, shearing that might take place in the lumbar spine. They push their hips forwards and arch their back terribly, and that pinches the nerve as well. So don't make that mistake. Finally, we've got the glutes. And a great example of a stretch here is to pop over and create that twist through the hip, not the spine, as we pull the knee towards the opposite shoulder. Too many people will yank it round and twist in this direction here, putting a torsion through the lumbar spine, often with a little bit of flexion and rounding of the lower back as well. So instead, when you're doing this stretch, you're going to sit nice and tall. You're going to stick your bum out to really focus the movement through the hip joint and pull the knee towards the shoulder, rather than trying to meet the shoulder to the knee. If you do these stretches in the right way, you're going to find, number 1, they're actually more effective. And number 2, you stop aggravating the root cause of your sciatica, resulting in short-term relief, but an aggravation of the problem that you suffer with later that day or the next. Generally, when you're doing these stretches, you want to hold it for about 30 seconds per stretch, and you want to repeat it a couple times for each muscle on each side. Step 3 is about controlling and managing that excess inflammation at the root cause of the problem. And here we're going to be using icing directly over this area of the lumbar spine. Not in your legs, not further down the leg, not in your buttocks, directly over this section of the lumbar spine. And we can easily find this area by locating the dimples, which are going to be around about the height that your belt or waistline will sit of your trousers, and then come into the middle and up about 1 centimeter or so, like so, and up to be over the target zone. Using a bag of frozen peas or something like that for 3 to 5 minutes at a time is a great way to finish this little routine. A few final bonuses for the relief routine are going to be switching out the icing for contrast bathing. This can actually be really, really good because contrast bathing, although it takes a little bit more time, it actually really works nicely to manage that inflammation down there in the lower back. And you can do this for 3 to 5 minutes of hot, 3 to 5 minutes of cold, cycled for about 20 minutes, always finishing on the cold. There will be a link down in the description to a full step-by-step tutorial on contrast bathing. If you're interested, check it out after this video. As well as that, we have a link down below to a full lower body massage routine, which is just going to be making use of those massage guns that so many of us have to really help keep those muscles nice and under control as a temporary measure while we're doing the parts in the latter stages of this video. Once you finish the video, do check out the links down in the description because there's a couple of others down there that will be really, really helpful for you in this early part. So that's the relief routine. You're going to ideally do this a couple times a day if you've got the time. I would probably suggest you start out with the stretching routine, those 3 stretches that we discussed, the hamstring, hip flexor, glute, then go into the bed decompression, finishing up with the towel, then get up nice and slowly and go and do that contrast bathing or icing, whichever one you prefer. If you're going to be doing the massage gun routine as well, I'd probably do that at the very start to really warm up those muscles before you go through the whole thing. Together, this routine will be absolutely awesome for you to continue to do in tandem with what we're about to discuss next. So this is the stuff that's actually going to help you rehab and strengthen and protect that lower back for not only right now, but long term. And these exercises are done in order to start off in the safest possible way, which you can do right now, even if you're really, really bad, and then build them up over time. And we're going to go through all of those, and you're going to see some examples on the screen as well. Very first one is about learning to stabilize your spine. And the big problem that you'll have when you've got an injury, as we mentioned earlier with regards to the stability or instability, is that things are going to move all over the place. And that's those classic flare-ups that you get from not doing anything really around the house. You moved a little bit funny and it caught, and that's because there's not that stability there. So one of the best exercises that we teach our members to do here is going to be the dead bug modified. And there's going to be a full tutorial on step-by-step instructions, how to make it harder, how to make it easier, link down in the description. But you're going to do this exercise for something like 3 sets of 10, and then 4, 5 sets of 10 to really build up that control, protecting that spine from going one way or another. Learning to actually recruit your deep core muscles to work to provide stability for that spine whilst it's vulnerable and recovering. This skill also translates perfectly to some of the upright weight-bearing exercises that you're going to do a little bit later on. And you must master this and make sure that you're not making simple mistakes like tucking the pelvis and flattening your spine to the ground, as so many people have been doing beforehand. And one of the key reasons I will show you, but we also did a full video on this movement, and there'll be a link in the description to the pelvic tuck video or pelvic tilt video, is that when we learn to engage the core properly with a neutral spine, you'll notice when you stand the spine up, the lumbar spine is over the hips. When the only way we've learned to do these exercises is with these pelvic tucks, as are so frequently incorrectly taught, what happens is you learn to stabilize the spine like so, and you can see immediately everything is less in line. We have the spine pushed back of the hips. It is not in a nice, uniform or vertical alignment, and therefore it puts more strain on the body. Learning to do these exercises on the floor should replicate what we do upright as well. So eliminate that pelvic tuck, as hard as it's going to be to start with. That's why I linked to that tutorial down below, because that'll give you some tools if you're really struggling. 3 of the exercises that we like the most, because they replicate real movements that you're already doing and will have instant benefits from a technical standpoint and delayed benefits from a strengthening standpoint, are going to be the squat, the hip hinge, and the step up. Because as I said, the squat you do every day, from the moment you get out of bed to the moment you sit on the toilet seat or sit in the car and get out again. We have the hip hinge, which is all sorts of things around the house, such as washing the dishes, brushing your teeth, washing your face in the morning. Leaning down in any direction to do anything in front of us will normally involve the hip hinge. And finally, if you live in a house as opposed to an apartment, you're going to have stairs that you have to go up every day, and learning to do this in an effective way is really, really important. And if you do live in an apartment on one level, you don't have stairs in the house, you're still going to have steps and curbs and other things around daily life that you will be exposed to, not least getting into your car, for example, as you put that one leg up, that really cannot be avoided. You should be working on stabilizing and learning to do these movements properly. So when you're doing these exercises, you want to aim for 3 sets of 10 to begin with, and then build to 4 and 5 sets of 10, just with body weight to start off with. You've got to get the control, because when you're doing the squat, the hip hinge, or the step up, your spine should remain neutral. It should be still throughout the entirety of that movement, whatever movement it might or might not be. In the case of the step up, there's going to be a little bit of left to right tilt that could happen, and you need to stabilize that. In the case of the hip hinge, it's very common for us to round the lower back, so we're just doing bending rather than hip hinging, which is definitely going to aggravate that lower back. And the same is true for the squat. As we squat down, we tend to allow our bum to tuck under, again, aggravating that root cause. And you can see why we need to master these things sooner rather than later, because you're doing those movements anyway every day. You better start learning to do them correctly. Once you've got those movements down, you're able to do them without pain, aggravation, and technically correctly. I will also link to one resource down here, which will be the link down in the description, to the take test, which is a great way to help get some feedback on the squat and on the hip hinge to check you're not rounding your lower back. And that's where we simply stick some tape along the back here. And as you do the movement, you'll be more aware of the tape pulling on you off your back if you're doing it incorrectly. The next step, once you've mastered these, is going to be adding resistance or load. And this can be done in a nice graded way. And I'll use the squat as an example, but the same is true for the hip hinge and the step up. And that is, you start off using a resistance band. The reason we use a resistance band on the squat as a first port of call is because the resistance varies. When you're stood up nice and tall, the resistance is at its strongest. And as you lower down slowly, the resistance power slightly decreases as you get to a more vulnerable position. So it's a little bit more forgiving if you make technical errors compared to a weight. Once you've mastered it with the band, you can switch onto a goblet or a high stance, kettlebell or dumbbell or some other weight, holding in your hands up at chest or chin height. This is great because, again, just like holding the band up there, it really encourages you to stand with good posture, and you will want to resist the urge to fold forwards. This helps you set your entire spine, set all of these muscles with the core, and it just helps make things a little bit safer. On top of this, your ability to hold the weight in your arms will naturally slow down the rate at which you progress the actual load that you're using, making it a little bit safer, because you've got to remember that those discs and other ligamentous structures in the lower back that are trying to heal remodel and change much more slowly than the muscles that you're using to drive these movements. The next step is to hold the kettlebell or the dumbbell at a low hold. This will allow you a little bit more strength in your arms to progress the weight a little bit further, to steadily expose that spine to a little bit more load through your progression and through the weights that you're using. And then the final step is obviously moving over to something like a barbell, where we can add a little bit more load again still to really build in some real strength back into that lumbar spine. Now, of course, you would go through that chain of events, chain of weights, chain of exercises over a very long period of months to years as you progress the weights. That's not to say that your symptoms will go away in months to years. They'll often go away much, much faster. And herein lies the problem, that people don't stick at these things properly. And the primary reason for this is, as the pain starts to go away, often much sooner, you stop doing your exercises. Therefore, we never deal with the vulnerability that's there. We never build back up the strength, and then we have the relapse. So please don't make that mistake. Now, I've mentioned a couple of exercises in here. Again, there's going to be linked down in the description to all of those, the step up, the hip hinge, the squat, etc. You can check those out after this video. One of the big overlooked things that holds people back is that they're really diligent with their exercises for that half an hour a day, let's say, but they actually don't apply any of those things to daily life. And there's a reason we've chosen those exercises that we just mentioned, because you should be working to control and stabilize that neutral spine on a daily basis. And it's failure to do that that gets you in trouble and prevents your sciatica from recovering. So you have to start today to implement some of this knowledge in your day-to-day life. It's no good doing a textbook perfect squat when you get in that chair and out of that chair in the living room, you're rounding your back like a prawn or a fishing hook. So please resolve to start to make some significant improvements incrementally over the next few weeks, days, and months to really help improve the application of your good exercise form to daily life. It will have such a positive impact on your recovery, it can't be overstated. Hopefully you found this video helpful. We've got a relief routine that you do daily to provide relief of strain on this section, the root cause of your sciatica. We've got some stretches, some contrast bathing. We've got some other bits and pieces to really help manage the symptoms, and you need to do those regularly. They have a temporary benefit, but are worthwhile doing 100%. We've then got the actual rehab work, which is rebuilding strength and stability into your spine. The immediate benefits of technical improvement and core recruitment and stabilization of your spine will start to make you safer from day one. And it's going to take a bit of time. You're going to be in this vulnerable spell where you are a little bit better, but you're not stronger and you're not competent fully at these exercises. And that's where daily life really needs to come into things. You have to be smarter with the way in which you're using your body on a daily basis. But as the weeks and months go by, you're going to be feeling better and you're going to be stronger. And the real thing here is that it's all too common that you'll start going and doing other stuff, extracurricular activities that are going to start to challenge your back in new ways that you haven't quite anticipated. And that can often be a source of relapse. So make sure you push yourself on. But you are at the same time going to be benefiting from increased muscular strength. So now you are actually objectively stronger and you've healed more from maybe a couple of weeks or months ago. And this is the point at which you start to see, or we start to see, people tail off in their consistency. You've got to keep it up, right? This is the really important part. You've come so far. You have to continue to build that strength, even when you feel like you perhaps are out of the woods and you're not in pain anymore. Ultimately, if you commit to doing some element of resistance training that incorporates the things that we've discussed in this video for the long term, it doesn't need to be tremendously time consuming. What can amount to 30 minutes to 45 minutes, 3 to 5 days a week, can really make the world of difference and allow you to enjoy, 168 hours every week? The other 160, you're going to sleep a good amount of them, but you've got so many more to enjoy all the other stuff. Commit to doing this stuff. Don't put it down the priority list just because there are other more important things or more enjoyable things. Now you're out of pain. Keep it up there and it'll keep you well. Hopefully you did find this video helpful. If you've been struggling with sciatica for a long period of time, do this stuff. We know it works. If you need more help, check out the link down in the descriptions for the tutorials and a link to the Fixing Back Pain Masterclass, which goes into this stuff in even more detail over 80 minutes. There's also a complimentary download there, so check that out after this video if you need help. And of course, if you want to work with us as part of the program, you're more than welcome to. You can check out the link down in the description to learn more about premium membership to the Back in Shape program. If you did find this video helpful and you know someone else that's struggling with their sciatica, consider sharing it with them. And until next time, thanks for watching.